Hello, BookTube. Matthew at Mayberry Book Club and I have been changing his channel name into a reality. We've been doing a book club of two for months now. It's been a lot of fun, and have been doing in October Frank Herbert's novel Dune, specifically because of this, because the squintillion dollar movie uh, directed by Denis Villeneuve came out this month in America. Started being distributed in America this month. Been distributed in the rest of the world, large parts of the rest of the world for a while now, but it's out in America now. It's getting tons and tons and tons of reviews. I felt that I should add to that torrent by making a dedicated movie review of my own, something I almost never do, either in print or online or on this channel. And once again, I got a lot of responses. I put my email on every video, so I've got a lot of responses to that video. Quite a few outraged film bros. I take a lot of shots at film bros in the course of that video, trying in my gentle, kind-hearted way to point out that they weren't watching the movie for a movie. They were watching the movie for video set pieces, for a kind of almost purely visual language that gives them dopamine highs that they know they can expect from this director. And quite a few of those film bros who got in touch with me because of my review wanted to direct me to different Dune reviews. Now, I've seen 100 Dune reviews on YouTube. So most of the links that they were sending me were to videos that I'd already seen. And as a result, I got to write back and point out to them, the reviewer in the video that you have pointed me to is talking only about visual set pieces, and admits over and over again in the course of his video that he doesn't have any idea what's going on in the movie, that he doesn't know who the characters are or what's at stake. And so many of the Film Bro videos that I watched about this movie not only start by saying that they don't know anything about what's going on here, but then finish up by saying, well, I haven't read the book. But he's a great director. Well, no, those two things don't go together. If the director can't make you understand what's going on in his own movie, I think that's a pretty elementary hurdle that proves that he's not a good director. But I also heard from quite a few people, I always do. This was true even decades ago, when every once in a while, I used to have, like, for instance, a book column a long, long time ago in the American Midwest. And when I would switch up my routine and write about a movie, I endlessly heard from people, and it's happened this time too. Lots and lots of people saying that they like how I talk about movies. One person who sent an email yesterday put it in a way that I guess boils down what a lot of those positive reactions have been, even if they don't agree with what I'm saying about the movie. When she wrote and said, the thing I like most about when you talk about movies is that I don't ever get the sense that anyone's paying you to say anything, positive or negative. And unfortunately, with the real big movie channels on YouTube, the real big movie bro guys on YouTube, I'm not faulting them for being slick. I have nothing against production values at all, although the funniest comment on the video itself that I did yesterday was from some well-meaning bot telling me that if I could just improve my set quality, I would have millions of viewers. Obviously, somebody who does not watch this channel. But I'm not faulting these film bros for being slick. But boy, oh boy, is there a slickness to their pronouncements too. I definitely feel that. The person who wrote that email to me had a few examples. I agree with her completely. I still watch those channels, but the element that she was referring to is trustworthiness. You watch those videos and you just don't trust the person you're listening to. You just don't. You might like their passion. You might like how informed they are about certain aspects. You might like the manic nature of their presentation, but you don't trust them at all. Something is too slick there. It sets off trigger warnings in me. It set off trigger warnings in her as well. She made a point of saying that she did not agree with anything in my video at all, but that she liked it. And that certainly I like doing it. There was a very brief period where I was an arts editor and needed a movie reviewer. Every arts editor needs a movie reviewer, I would think. And I didn't have one. So there was a brief period where I was my own movie reviewer. That's where I confess I enjoyed it. But I don't know. For all the people who've been emailing me asking, can we have more movie reviews? I don't go to movies in theaters. So it's going to take a lot. I wasn't going to miss watching Dune and watching it closely. I've watched it 3 times now. I wasn't going to miss that, but there are quite a few big movies coming out that I will certainly give a miss to, that I won't care about one way or another. A couple of you mentioned a couple of forthcoming movies that you'd like to see me talk about, devote a video to. In November and in December, especially December, where there are lots of big make or break economic items coming out, gigantic bombshell things coming out. So far, I've received a few dozen emails on the subject, and so far the winner by simple majority is the new Spider-Man movie. Is it Far From Home? Or Into the Spider-Verse or something like that. The one where, you've seen the trailer, the one where a Spider-Man, Peter Parker, disrupts a spell of Doctor Strange's that sends them catapulting into alternate realities. Where they, I guess, meet their alternate selves. I think the big reveal of that Spider-Man movie is that 4-foot-tall tobacco addict Tom Holland is going to meet 4-foot-5 tall tobacco addict Tobey Maguire and 6-foot-tall tobacco addict Andrew Garfield, all of whom have played Spider-Man in between smoke breaks. So I don't know if that's actually true. I imagine it is. But we shall see. That has the highest number of votes. I don't know one way or another. Fortunately, for my own peace of mind, I got to retreat back to the book for today's video. Because although Matthew and I finished our read-along of Dune last week, that doesn't finish the book. The book actually has appendices in the tradition of Lord of the Rings. And in the tradition of Lord of the Rings, there are stories told in the appendices. Maybe not to quite the extent in Lord of the Rings. There are epic stories told in the appendices of Lord of the Rings, hinted at in the appendices of Lord of the Rings. It's in the appendices of Lord of the Rings that Tolkien reminds you that Sauron didn't just attack Minas Tirith. The attack on Minas Tirith was part of a gigantic front of attacks that took place everywhere along that whole front in Middle-earth. There were gigantic, epic battles that took place far from the Gladden Fields, and that don't get recorded by Tolkien in the epic narrative of The Lord of the Rings itself. Instead, they are alluded to in the appendices, and also everything that comes after that is alluded to. Dune isn't quite so much of that. It isn't quite so extensive as that. There aren't as many appendices, but they are intensely interesting in throwing some light on what was on Frank Herbert's mind when he wrote this book, what he thought needed to be there. There's a whole appendix on a report about the failures of the Bene Gesserit to predict how badly things would go wrong on Arrakis, on Dune. The whole point of Bene Gesserit is that they are long-term planners, but they fail completely. They don't read the warning signs when one of their own, Lady Jessica, disobeys her instructions when it comes to their centuries-long breeding program. That should have been the mother of all red flags right there. They don't pay attention when reports come that her son, the son she was not supposed to have with Duke Leto II, Paul Atreides, is, even before he gets to the planet Arrakis, having visions of the future. Totally unusual, not supposed to happen, and many other things that happen once the family moves to Dune. There's a whole appendix on an outraged report about how the Bene Gesserit really should have seen that coming. They really should have seen that coming. And there's also my favorite appendix here is about religion. Religion is so important in the novel. And Appendix 2 is called The Religion of Dune. And there is a long part here on the writing of the Orange Catholic Bible, a religious text that is mentioned a few times in Dune. Some of its verses give comfort to some characters in Dune. And we're told here about centuries before, when the Orange Catholic Bible was put together from a gigantic convocation of religions. Any religion with more than 1 million adherents was invited to this convocation, and it took years for the Commission of Ecumenical Translators to come out with the Orange Catholic Bible. And they had a governing principle as to what would be in and what would be out, what would be included and what wouldn't be. And I think it comes pretty close to being Frank Herbert's own definition of religion. One of the characters in this story, it's a little story in the anecdote. It's in the appendix. It goes on. I wish that we had a book on the subject. The quote is, "Men, finding no answers to the Sunan, the 10,000 religious questions from the Sharia, now apply their own reasoning. All men seek to be enlightened. Religion is but the most ancient and honorable way in which men have striven to make sense out of God's universe. Scientists seek the lawfulness of events. It is the task of religion to fit man into this lawfulness." That's pretty neat. And as usual, I don't know how many of you have read, there was a book a long time ago, I don't know that it's been printed ever since, called the Dune Encyclopedia. A huge compendium of nonfiction notes and appendices and whatnot by Frank Herbert and some other ardent fans, fleshing out the history of the Dune world, the details of the Dune world. It's amazing reading. It really is. It's almost like another Dune novel. There's so many stories in there, and it's not just factual stuff. There's a glossary. One of the appendices here is just a straight-up glossary of some of the key terms in the book. And the Dune Encyclopedia is not that. There's a huge amount of stuff in there that is so interesting. That's what rereading these appendices reminded me of. The only problem with this particular volume, this is the movie version of the book. Kind of like the iconography of the cover there. That's the main reason that I got it. I could also stand to have a Dune bookmark or two if they make them. I don't know. I haven't been to my retail bookstore in quite some time, so not since I got this. So I don't know if that merchandise has started hitting bookstores. The only problem with this particular volume is that once the appendices are done, once the glossary of terms is done, and once the map is done, there is a map in Dune, but it's all the way at the end. And it's kind of monotonous because it's all sand, except for the minor ice caps of the planet. After all of that, there's an afterword by Brian Herbert, who has put his thumbprint all over his father's work, to the point where I have seen young readers on YouTube and off YouTube say, well, there's a Dune movie coming out, and I want to read the book, but where do I start? There are like 30 books in this series. I always want to tell them, no, there aren't 30 books in this series. No, there aren't. I know that the publisher really wants to erase the distinction between books written by Brian Herbert and books written by Frank Herbert, but your own reading sensibilities will not erase that distinction. Brian Herbert is a serviceable science fiction hack, and Frank Herbert is not. His writing is actually brilliant. So there's a very big difference between Paul of Dune, Jessica of Dune, Sandriders of Dune, Soothsayer of Dune, the Butlerian Jihad, the House Atreides, House Harkonnen, House Carino, the million books that have come out from Brian Herbert. I don't know why a literary son would do that. I really don't. I'm sure that if I sat him down in this room over wine and calzones, he might tell me that it was affection for his father's beloved creation that caused him to do this. But affection only takes you so far. At some point, he has to realize that he's adulterating his father's work. I don't know. I don't know one way or another. He's certainly not doing any kind of... I had some of those feelings about Christopher Tolkien as well, but Christopher Tolkien was also providing invaluable literary service in literally curating his father's literary remains. Brian Herbert isn't doing anything like that. All of the stuff that's in his books, and none of it is hinted at in Frank Herbert's book. And you get the strong sense that Herbert might have had a lot of disagreements with a lot of it. I had to deal with that afterwards. I read it, of course, because it's the son writing about his father. That's going to be interesting right there. But I wish that it weren't in this book. And one thing that's not present in the appendices here. The appendices are historical documents, right? They are historical documents of people writing about the Arrakis incident, is what it's called, and Paul Muad'Dib as figures that have already happened. Same thing with all of almost every chapter of this book starts with some excerpt from one of the million books written by Princess Irulan. Princess Irulan is one of the daughters of the Emperor, the Padishah Emperor. And she's tall and beautiful, and she's an adept of the Bene Gesserit, and she is chosen by Paul Atreides at the end of the story to be his wife. to be the female head of his household. She's his link to the throne. But she'll never be his beloved. She'll never share his bed. She'll never have his children. His love is Chani. But almost every chapter of this book starts off with an excerpt from one of apparently the endless number of books that Princess Irulan wrote to keep herself busy during the day. And those are all also historical accounts. We get the strong sense in the appendices of this book and in all of those excerpts that the events of Dune, the events of the main narrative of this novel, happened a while ago. Not forever ago. I think if you cobble together all of the excerpts from Princess Irulan's books in the excerpts that we get in this book, I think it's pretty obvious from those excerpts that Paul Atreides is still alive when she's writing these books. That she doesn't outlive him, in other words. So it's not ancient history. But it is still history. It is done and settled. And that raises immediately your awareness of what's not present in the appendices of this book, which is Leto II. It's just the God Emperor who is coming. Now, you might say, well, okay, if Princess Irulan is still alive, if Paul Atreides has just recently achieved the throne, if the Fremen jihad across the entire galaxy is only just barely gearing up, then of course Duke Leto wouldn't be present. But we're talking about a lot of characters here who have a lot of prescience. They can see into the future. We're told that. One of the appendices is about how the Bene Gesserit had long suspected that the guild navigators who use a limited form of prescience in order to make spaceflight possible can sense disturbances down the line in the future. They can sense when some larger impinging consciousness is likewise aware of those future lines of causation. But the most impression that we get in these appendices is that they think that larger impending consciousness is Paul Atreides, Muad'Dib. I'm not faulting Frank Herbert, of course, but nevertheless, that's one of the risks that you run when prescience is one of the elements in a book that you write, if you intend to write sequels, is that I don't think that Leto II, God Emperor of Dune, living for 1,000 years, I don't think that anything like that had entered Frank Herbert's mind when he wrote this book. And so the God Emperor is missing from the appendices of this book, when in the internal continuity of the story, he wouldn't be. Even if he couldn't be named, every prescient character would know something much bigger than Paul Atreides was coming. but I'm not faulting that, and I'm also trying not to let that realization. I was thinking about that a little this morning, when suddenly I had the horrific realization that thinking about that was making me want to read God Emperor of Dune again. I must not. I have lots of books to read, new releases between now and the end of the year, a huge number of them. I cannot read God Emperor of Dune or Dracula or the Jungle Book. I cannot do it. So anyway, this wraps up the video, the read along that Matthew and I are doing for Dune. Tons and tons of fun. And that raises the question of next month, of November, for our final read along of the year. And Matthew came up with a great idea. I'll link to his video about these appendices, but also to his announcement video, just so that I don't flood the airways. I won't make another announcement video of my own. He came up with the idea of reading nonfiction for Nonfiction November, ancient nonfiction. So we are reading Suetonius and Plutarch. Now, Suetonius is an ancient writer. He wrote the 12 Caesars. He's an ancient writer that I really like. And Plutarch is an ancient writer that I absolutely love. And Plutarch wrote the Parallel Lives, which is gigantic, 10 times as long as Suetonius. And Matthew came up with a great idea of reading not pairs of lives. Plutarch, when he could in his book, the structure of his book is to pair a Greek life with a Roman life. Instead, we're pairing a Suetonius life with a Plutarch life. We're doing Julius Caesar in both Suetonius and Plutarch. And we're doing Galba in both Suetonius and Plutarch. Now, Julius Caesar is the best known of all the Roman emperors, and Galba is one of the least known of, certainly in the first century of the Roman Empire, after Julius Caesar. There was a year where a number of different claimants tried to take the throne of Rome. Otho, Galba, and Vitellius were the three losers, and then finally Vespasian, a man named Vespasian, and his two very able sons came along and nailed it down, and they stayed in power for a long time. But the Romans called it, a time of enormous upheaval. Historians have called it the year of the four emperors. Galba was one of those emperors, and both Suetonius and Plutarch wrote lives of this guy, so it's going to be so much fun to go through those. We're doing a properly nonfiction November read-along for November. I'll leave a link to Matthew's video so that you can have all the details. But that does it for Dune. Good Lord, what a Dune-centric month this was. Not only read along this book, but also watching this movie, which, as I mentioned yesterday, is almost certainly the last big screen, huge cinematic attempt at Dune that we will get in our lifetimes. I mean, what other director is going to go to, producers or executive producers and say, I want to do a 2-hour movie of Dune? Who's going to do that in, 2047? Who's going to do that? People are going to say, well, didn't Villeneuve do that a long time ago? Didn't he do that? And, that was hugely expensive. I don't know that we need to do that again. I don't know. We shall see. But in the meantime, we're done. I am done with Dune for 2021. So I'm going to wrap this up, but I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.